Chapter 1. Unraveling Plans. James had always been a man of careful planning and thoughtful decisions. His career as an architect demanded precision, and he applied the same meticulous attention to detail in his personal life. He had been dating Emily for 3 years, and he believed she was the one. Her vivacious spirit complemented his reserved nature, creating a harmonious balance. Their wedding was set for summer, and he spared no expense in making sure everything was perfect. Emily, on the other hand, had a flair for the dramatic and a penchant for spontaneity. Her free-spirited nature was one of the many things that drew James to her. She often surprised him with impromptu getaways and grand gestures of love. So, when she mentioned she wanted to go on a solo trip to Scotland to unwind before the wedding, James saw no harm in it. He trusted her completely. James had been saving diligently for their wedding and future together. When Emily asked for money to cover her trip, he transferred the funds without hesitation. He wanted her to have a wonderful time and return refreshed for their big day. Chapter 2. Seeds of Doubt. As Emily's departure date approached, James began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. She seemed distracted and more attached to her phone than usual. Late-night calls and secretive messages became frequent. Whenever James inquired, Emily brushed off his concerns with plausible explanations. She claimed it was just wedding stress and last-minute trip preparations. Still, a gnawing sense of unease began to take root in James's mind. Determined to keep his fears at bay, James immersed himself in his work. But his unease grew when he noticed significant withdrawals from their joint account. Emily had used a substantial amount of money, more than what was needed for a vacation in Scotland. Confronting her seemed futile, as she always had an answer ready. She assured him it was for some additional expenses and souvenirs. Chapter 3. The Revelation. Emily's trip to Scotland began on a bright note. She sent James picturesque photos and loving messages, assuring him she missed him. However, James couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that something was amiss. On a whim, he decided to check her social media, something he rarely did. To his surprise, Emily had posted several pictures, but in none of them was she alone. A mysterious man appeared in almost every photo. Feeling his heart pound in his chest, James dug deeper. Through mutual friends and some online sleuthing, he discovered the identity of the man. Richard, an old flame of Emily's, was apparently living in Scotland. Pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, and James was left with a bitter realization. Emily had used his money to go and meet another man. James's initial shock gave way to anger and heartbreak. He confronted Emily during one of their scheduled video calls. At first, she tried to deny everything, but when James showed her the photos he had found, her defenses crumbled. She admitted to the affair, claiming it was a moment of weakness and that it meant nothing. She said she was confused and needed closure with Richard before marrying James. Chapter 4. Confrontation and Collapse. Emily returned from her trip, glowing and full of stories. James, having steeled himself for this moment, calmly confronted her with the evidence. Her initial denial turned into tearful confessions and apologies. She begged for forgiveness, insisting that her feelings for Richard were in the past and that she loved James. James felt a cold fury he had never known. His carefully constructed world was collapsing around him. Emily's betrayal cut deep, and the pain was unbearable. In a voice barely above a whisper, he told her it was over. He couldn't marry someone who had so blatantly shattered his trust. Emily moved out of their shared apartment, leaving behind an atmosphere of heartbreak and regret. Friends and family were shocked at the sudden split, and James found himself having to explain the situation over and over. Each retelling was like reopening a wound that hadn't had time to heal. Chapter 5. Picking up the pieces. In the aftermath of their breakup, James focused on rebuilding his life. He threw himself into his work, creating some of the best designs of his career. The process of healing was slow, but he found solace in his passion. Friends and family rallied around him, offering support and encouragement. He took up new hobbies, started working out more regularly, and even joined a local hiking club. The physical exertion and the beauty of nature helped him clear his mind. Slowly but surely, he began to rediscover parts of himself that had been overshadowed by his relationship with Emily. James also started seeing a therapist. Talking through his emotions and learning coping mechanisms helped him process the betrayal and move forward. His therapist encouraged him to focus on self-love and to set boundaries for future relationships. Chapter 6. A new beginning months turned into a year, and James gradually began to open his heart again. He met Sophie, a colleague who shared his love for architecture and adventure. Their relationship blossomed naturally, built on mutual respect and understanding. Sophie's honesty and kindness were a balm to James's wounded soul. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through a park, James realized that his heart was finally healing. The scars of the past were still there, but they no longer defined him. He had learned the hard way that true love couldn't be forced or faked. It had to be nurtured with trust and respect. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over them, James knew he was ready to embrace a future full of promise and love, leaving behind the shadows of betrayal. With Sophie by his side, he felt hopeful and excited about what lay ahead. James's journey had been painful, but it had also been a path of growth and self-discovery. He had learned to value himself and to demand the same respect and honesty from others. As he looked into Sophie's eyes, he knew that he was finally in a place where he could love and be loved truly and deeply. Chapter 7. The Road to Healing. James's relationship with Sophie deepened over time. They traveled together, exploring both the architectural marvels of various cities and the natural beauty of the countryside. Each trip brought them closer as they shared their dreams and aspirations for the future. Sophie encouraged James to pursue his passion projects, and he found himself designing innovative buildings that gained acclaim in the architectural community. Her support and belief in him were unwavering, something he had never fully experienced before. Despite the happiness he found with Sophie, the memories of Emily occasionally resurfaced. James would sometimes find himself lost in thought, wondering how things had gone so wrong. But Sophie's presence was a constant reminder of how far he had come and how much he had learned. Chapter 8. Rebuilding Trust. Trust had been a major casualty of James's past relationship, and rebuilding it wasn't easy. He was upfront with Sophie about his fears and insecurities, and she responded with patience and understanding. They attended couples therapy sessions to ensure they were on the same page and to work through any issues that arose. James learned to communicate openly and honestly, a skill he realized he had neglected in his previous relationship. Sophie's transparency and willingness to work through challenges together reinforced his belief in the strength of their bond. Chapter 9. A Love Renewed. 2 years after his breakup with Emily, James proposed to Sophie during a quiet evening at home. It wasn't a grand gesture, but an intimate moment that felt right for both of them. Sophie said yes with tears of joy in her eyes, and they began planning a future together that was built on a foundation of trust, love, and mutual respect. Their wedding was a simple but elegant affair, attended by close friends and family. As James looked into Sophie's eyes during their vows, he felt a profound sense of peace and happiness. He had come a long way from the heartbreak and betrayal, emerging stronger and wiser. Chapter 10. Moving Forward. James and Sophie continued to build their lives together, facing challenges and celebrating successes as a team. They supported each other's careers and personal growth, always prioritizing their relationship. James often reflected on his journey and realized that the pain he had endured had ultimately led him to a place of true happiness. James also reconnected with old friends and made new ones, expanding his social circle and finding joy in shared experiences. He participated in community projects and mentorship programs, giving back to the community that had supported him during his darkest times. Epilogue. A future full of promise. James's story is one of resilience and the power of self-discovery. He learned that trust and love must be earned and nurtured, and that true happiness comes from within. His journey from betrayal to healing shaped him into a better person and partner. As he and Sophie embarked on their future together, James felt grateful for the lessons he had learned and the love he had found. He knew that life would have its ups and downs, but with Sophie by his side, he was ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they built a life full of love, trust, and endless possibilities,